In our last session we have seen that how to use custom directive as a attribute, as a class and as a comment. So in our this session we will see what is controller, how to use controller in AngularJS. What is the basic features that Angular controller provides you? Why one should go for Angular controller? These all things we will cover in today's session. So what is Angular controller? Angular controller is an object that controls your view to module. Means it is an intermediary part that is wholly responsible for performing all kind of actions like calling functions, assigning variables, is totally controlled by Angular controller. For this reason we have to use Angular controller. Okay, so how to use that? So for using Angular controller you have to use some predefined directives, that is ng controller, inside your DOM. That is, it could be within your div tag, within your body tag, or anywhere else inside your HTML or your view. So once you have to define that ng controller is equal to your controller name, and then in your JavaScript code you have to write that functionality for that particular controller. So inside the controller what else you can do, and what is the main feature, what are the main benefits of using Angular controller? So inside the controller you can define your application variables. Means what kind of variable, whatever variable you will define inside your controller, that will be easily accessible inside the HTML file. So inside controller I can define any variables. It could be string type, integer type, array type, object type, anything. And I can also declare function, definition of function can be declared, and many function I can write over in controller, and as per need I can call them from my view. So these are the contents of Angular controller. So when we need to do some actions, like we want something to be happen after clicking some button or after writing some input inside the text box, so I need some function to be called at that moment. So where I will write those functions? So that is the place where the functions are written. So that function is written inside the controller. So whenever you do some actions, it calls the controller, appropriate controller which you are using inside the HTML file. So it will look for that controller and it will go to that controller and it will look for that particular function which you have called, and it will evaluate the expression and it will return that value inside your view. So then you can use that value and you can continue with your development. So this is all about the benefits and features of controller. And what are the extra things which we can do with controller? So we can have inside an ng app, inside our application. Suppose I have defined ng app is equal to my app, and inside that my app I can use as many controller as I want. Many controller, it could be one controller, two controller, that depends on your requirement, how many controller you need. So in a HTML file you can define many controller, and that can be defined separately inside your JavaScript file. And inside that JavaScript file many controller have their different codes. So whenever you need to call some controller, you can simply call that particular controller and execute that controller's method and variable's name inside your HTML. So it could be inner controller, like a controller within controller. It is possible inside HTML. So you can declare that there are many methods and many scenario that how you can use, how you can achieve that inside your, how to get those functionality inside your HTML file. So that depends on your how to write that code. So I will show you that in an example where you can easily understand that how we can create inner controller, how we can call that inner controller. Apart from this we can have multiple controller, means a controller in some div, and another controller in some other div. They are not dependent, means they are not like the first div controller and the next is inner controller. So it's not like that. That was our first case, that is inner controller. In that, what we do, the controller inside another controller. But in this case, that is in multiple controller, what we do, a controller in separate div and another controller in separate div. So these two are different methods of accessing controller and doing your things what you want in controller. So friends, we have seen that what is controller and how to use controller in AngularJS. In our next video we will see how to use controller as an example. We will see an example that will demonstrate you how to use controllers.